You will be shocked to know some of the most unique and strange events in history. Number 1. A bizarre trend became popular in Europe and America during the 19th century called mummy unrolling. At that time, many mummies were being discovered in Egypt, and people began treating them merely as ancient treasures or objects of entertainment. Wealthy individuals or scholars would buy mummies and unwrap them in front of a public audience, just like a show. This made people feel as if they were witnessing history come alive right before their eyes. In some cases, invitations were sent out for theaters or private parties, and the audience would clap and enjoy the spectacle. The strange part is that people began viewing this process as a combination of a scientific experiment and entertainment. However, in reality, it was a form of cultural disrespect, as these were the bodies of real human beings preserved with religious and sacred rituals. It became almost a fashion statement during the Victorian era. Doctors and collectors would even grind the mummies into powder to use in medicines. From today's perspective, this looks horrifying and insensitive, but people back then viewed it as a way to gain adventure and knowledge. Sadly, because of this mummy unrolling trend, many priceless mummies and their secrets were destroyed forever. Number 2. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, a new medical technology called incubators was discovered. This device was designed to save premature babies by providing them with a controlled environment. However, hospitals were not taking this technology seriously, as doctors believed it was a waste of money. But a doctor named Martin Cooney decided that if hospitals wouldn't use incubators, he would showcase them at public fairs and amusement parks. Consequently, from 1896 until around 1940, baby incubator exhibitions were held across Europe and America. Premature babies were kept inside glass incubators, and people bought tickets just to see them. The strange thing was that these shows acted as entertainment on one side and life-saving medical centers on the other. Martin saved thousands of premature babies this way. It was completely free for parents who couldn't afford it because the funding came directly from the public's ticket sales. According to estimates, more than 85% of the babies kept in those exhibitions survived, whereas the survival rate in hospitals at that time was extremely low. Today, incubators are a staple in every NICU, but their journey began as a carnival attraction. Number 3. Around the 16th century, when Portuguese missionaries arrived in Japan, Christianity began spreading rapidly. However, in the 1600s, the Tokugawa shogunate viewed Christianity as a threat and banned it. After that, anyone caught practicing their Christian faith was given extremely painful punishments. One of those punishments was crucifixion. However, this crucifixion was a bit different from the European style. In this method, victims were tied to a cross-like wooden structure and then pierced with long spears. Sometimes they were hung upside down or left to face a slow death. The strangest part was that crucifixion in Japan wasn't reserved just for Christians. It was also given to criminals and rebels. Essentially, it was a form of public execution where people were punished in front of everyone to strike fear into others so they would follow the rules. This practice continued between the 17th and 19th centuries, writing a very dark chapter in Japanese history. Number 4. An unusual art form known as headless portraits became popular during the Victorian era. Photography was a brand new technology back then, and people wanted to make their photos look artistic and dramatic. Surprisingly, some people would pose for photos as if their heads had been chopped off. Photographers achieved this by using double exposure, clever positioning, and darkroom editing to make it look like the person's head was separated from their body. The people of the Victorian era loved this for its novelty and shock value. Just like people use Photoshop or horror filters today, the people of that era found it to be fun and a bit of entertainment. Number 5. A strange surgery called a lobotomy was performed in the early 20th century to treat mental illnesses. In this surgical procedure, certain connections in the frontal lobe of the brain were severed to calm the patient down. Remarkably, it was hailed as a miracle cure, and doctors began prescribing it for anxiety, depression, and even mood swings. In 1935, Portuguese neurologist Antonio Egas Moniz first introduced the lobotomy, and he even received a Nobel Prize for it in 1949. However, the real story behind it was incredibly dark. When American doctor Walter Freeman popularized this procedure, he made it even quicker and simpler. His famous method was the ice pick lobotomy, where a sharp rod was literally inserted through the patient's eye socket to sever brain tissues. Shockingly, this procedure was sometimes performed in doctors' offices or even in front of the public during stage shows. Unbelievably, this operation was performed on more than 40,000 people across America and Europe. The patients included soldiers, women, and sometimes even children. While some patients became calm after the surgery, most suffered from severe personality disorders. They either became permanently disabled or were left in a zombie-like state. Many people even lost their lives. It seemed as though doctors were treating the human brain as a mere experiment. This was a dark chapter in medical science. After medicines were introduced in the 1950s, lobotomies gradually stopped, and today it is considered a horrific mistake. Number 6. There is an old house in Dorset County, England, called Bettiscombe Manor. Around the 17th to 18th century, the owner of this house brought an enslaved servant with him from Africa, who eventually passed away due to some reason. Before dying, his final wish was for his body to be sent back to his homeland. However, the family ignored his request and buried him near the house. Terrifyingly, strange incidents began occurring in the manor after that. People reported hearing screaming and crying sounds coming from the grave at night, along with disturbances inside the house. Local people believed that if his body was disturbed or if his skull was removed from the manor, even bigger trouble would follow. Therefore, at one point, only his skull was kept inside the manor, and it came to be known as the Screaming Skull. Even today, the skull is kept inside Bettiscombe Manor, and locals remember it as a curse. Number 7. When Neil Armstrong took his first step on the moon in 1969, the world thought mankind had written a new piece of history. However, some people were never satisfied with this event and claimed that the moon landing never actually happened. Interestingly, the points they raised were quite shocking. For instance, how was the American flag planted by the astronauts fluttering in a vacuum when there is no air on the moon? They also argued that if the astronauts were truly in space, stars should have been visible in the background, yet the sky appeared completely empty in every photograph. The shadows and lighting also looked suspicious to them, resembling spotlights used in a film studio. Surprisingly, some people believed that achieving such a massive feat with 1960s technology was impossible. Therefore, they claimed everything was filmed on a Hollywood-style set just to show the Soviet Union during the Cold War that America had won. On the other hand, NASA stated that the astronauts brought back 382 kilograms of moon rocks, which were entirely different from any rock found on Earth. Despite this, many people still believe the moon landing was a staged drama, while scientists and evidence prove it to be 100% true. What is your opinion on this? Do mention it in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and share the video. See you in the next video. Thanks.